And we're back. This is a Middle Perch live on the internet. I am MTK on the MIC. Today is Tuesday. Here, it's Wednesday in Australia, Japan, China, and just about that time in India, about to be midnight between the two in India. And as a traveler, as a person who's been around the world several times and who thinks about myself in motion more than being still these last several years, and indeed these several days have been very hard for me. But one of the cool things about our perch that we've set up, the middle perch, is that it's everywhere at once. I love that. And so when we open the show and we talk about the time in India or Australia or, California or London, that instantly in my mind, I can swim to those places. As I'm saying the name of Paris, I can imagine walking down the street in Paris. Overcoat, scarf, hat, hands in pockets, headphones on. Or I can do it with New York in my mind, or San Francisco, or Los Angeles, or Tokyo, Kamakura, any of that area, Yokohama, Taiwan. My memories of the infrastructure and roots of those places is so deep and intense because I stayed for long stretches. My agenda from the beginning was move to places and stay for at least one set of seasons was my thesis. You can't judge a place if you haven't seen every season. And you can, as you get older, make extrapolations about seasons, but it's not healthy to do if you go for just 1 year. You go for a year and you think you know everything about a place. It could be an anomaly, and in reality, that's an impractical way to judge anywhere. So years at a time, 4 years at a time, 5 years at a time in San Francisco, Oakland, Los Angeles, New York, Austin, 4 or 5 years in those places. That adds up, right? 25 years. And then 2 years or more in places like Taiwan, Japan, India. Because I was rootless when I arrived and have been observing the United States from my earliest days as an impartial observer of the U.S., even up to and after the point I became a citizen of the U.S. 38 years ago. That distance, which has isolated me, is also a thing that I love and fills me with meaning and is the soul of my work. And these principles that I used, which were scientific in nature but applied to the humanities, are, in my opinion, active consilience on my part without me knowing what consilience was before 98. I was actively engaged in a thing that I need to communicate somehow. Because now it's gotten to the point where as an isolate, it's too much to handle, And I'm not useful if I don't share what I've learned, I think. So there's 2 parts to this that I'm struggling with. Part 1 is I was a writer for 25 years. I still write every day, but I wrote every day, huge chunks, and crafting for years, 25 years, before I basically abandoned it the 9/11 event happened, and then all the nonsense. Actually, even before that, you could say the 2000 election happened. And I was right there watching it from the national magazine as a journalist, and it shook me up. I was like, what? I couldn't believe the selection of Bush. And it enraged me and began my withdrawal from, the legit world, or whatever you want to call it, straight edge world, the mainstream world, the thing that Trump Americans are trying to make into normative, which is insane, by using a TV guy. So I wrote for years, and then when 9/11 happened, certainly, and maybe even before that, as I'm saying, the 2000 election, the beam of my writing stopped being on fiction, which I think of as egoistic. When I'm writing fiction, one of my problems is my humility makes me feel like, oh my God, it's all about you, isn't it? Self, I don't know if that's because of an insecurity or because my parents were just the way they were, or both. But my parents and our culture is very much about that. You don't praise yourself. You don't promote yourself. You do good works, and by these works you will be appraised and appreciated and promoted. And so I did this for so many people who took advantage of it. And all along I was thinking, oh, well, they'll do it back. And no, they all basically thought I was a tiny thing in their frame of reference. They didn't even grasp the depth at all. So we could have done so much more. Didn't grasp the depth. That's not a right phrase. We need the phrase for that. Because you can't grasp depth. You can't grasp depth. So, as a writer, I wrote with the typewriter. A lot. I mean, at least hundreds of thousands of words I've written on a typewriter. I crossed the 1 million word mark in the 90s. So I had written 1 million words by the 90s, long before Twitter, before any of this. Writing has now been diffused by all of these media, which is amazing to me. And so I struggle right now and then software at least wasn't, like, for example, this, as you know, is not connected to the internet. So when I write on that machine, it feels different from when I'm writing on the cloud. Maybe it doesn't to you, but a lot of what good writing is for me is confronting myself, confronting the world, confronting truths I've discovered and trying to figure out how to explain them. It's original work. And the mind behaves differently for us, our generations that came up writing by hand, writing with a typewriter, writing with a word processor, and now writing just basically on the net using short bursts in the case of Twitter and Instagram, and Facebook, slightly longer in Facebook. And the attention span of the populace has shrunk so much that it's impossible to really enjoy writing for me without feeling very egotistical. So I trained all of it on journalism, and I was a journalist for another 5-6 years as a writer. All my writing went into that. And I started making way more art. And then art started to take off, and my disgust for everything, political, historical, and social, grew. So I wrote less and less. The short story that I just submitted to the Nelson Algren contest in January is the first piece of fiction I've written that I feel like I really wrote a piece of fiction, in 11 years. 2008 was the last one. So my struggle is to figure out what all of this travel and purpose and mechanics of mine, the methodology that's isolated me so much, what is the message of it, or what are the messages? It's clearly not one message, but what are the messages of it? And then figure out how to communicate that. And things that cross my mind are a novel, or a big canvas, or a small canvas, or a tiny canvas this big, or a live stream video, or one-man show, theater piece for an ensemble cast, or a TV show, or a movie script. So all these swim in my mind all the time, and I'm constantly learning from watching movies and reading books and reading about books and reading about movies and thinking about craft and seeing people around me make stuff and watching how they do it. And 10 years in Riga helped a lot because it gave me close proximity to a lot of processes. And this is a struggle. This is a struggle. It looks like I'm not doing anything while you're staring at me right now, but what I'm doing is, and as we talked about on the previous episode on memory, which, oh man, that was such interesting. We should start thinking about that again too, because the phenomenological response from people that I interviewed after that was extremely interesting too. But what you're seeing me do right now is try to think my way out of something that I'm struggling to think my way out of for decades, not weeks. And I'll find starting points and they kind of dwindle out, or I'll take a perspective and I'm thinking that'll work, and then it just doesn't. So live streaming for me right now is a means of thinking out loud that I can document. So I can think improvisationally as I'm doing now, right? That's why it's frightening to start the live stream without a script. That's something that I'm supposed to be working on here, right? For myself, I mean. I know I am myself when I'm in public in some manifestation. I mean, that self is a manufactured self that I'm projecting, right? So somewhere between that self and the self I am when there's no computers connected and only a typewriter in a room with no microphones or cameras, that I've created to simulate everywhere in the world. Remember, I've created this to simulate, if I blink, I can be in India. If I blink, I can be in Japan. If I blink, I can be wherever. It's to simulate the physical thing that is me during this experience. That's why this is called a middle perch. It's a middle perch live on the internet amidst everything, everywhere. And I don't have an allegiance to any this is a tricky one, nationalistic or religio-social or political ideology. I have no allegiance. And I have great awareness from both study of my degrees in political science and history, statistics, graduate degrees in statistics and demography, and years of experience are now in a middle perch that is everywhere at once, from which I'm attempting to communicate. These tracks, all made by me, were supposed to make this happen too, right? So that I didn't have to worry about the copyright issues. The imagery that you're surrounding, that's in the perch, if you will. From the elephant, my totem animal, Buddha, 1993, when I first said World Peace One. I don't want to see World War III. I want to see World Peace One. And what I call World Peace One, of course, February 15th of 2003, when 7 million people all over the world, in different countries, everywhere, collectively protested war on Iraq. I call that World Peace One. You got Geronimo up there. You got Sitting Bull. You got George Washington. Racer 5. Oh, look, that's a Westphal Terran. Some Escher. All of these things. The images that rotate here. There's the Bull, Orlando. Cepeda. The sounds in this space, the art, everything is required for my expression. Like, it's all a part of getting. Then the thing is, in the midst of that massive busyness, to acutely drop a thing like that, or the thing I'm working on now, or Molka Hualtiloya, and that is on no one's time but my own, and the outcome is extremely significant to me, totally. And then what happens after that, I don't care. That's not true. Obviously, I care because I mind where my things go and stuff. But I mean, I'm not thinking about it after that. I'm thinking about it going somewhere so that after I'm gone, everybody can just look at them and it'll all make sense. I think that is a more appropriate way of stating what the art stuff has been doing. But this is clearly not an art issue. This is a writing issue. I woke up this morning thinking about the idea of writing a letter to, and this is what the thought was, as a total thought. It was, dear Mom, Dad, and every American I ever met. As a title. I took what you gave me. I asked questions along the way. I did not parrot or adopt willy-nilly or just blindly. I did it with critique, my mind, my active critical mind from a very young age. So there was a lot of negation, a lot of me saying no to stuff, but there was active yesing going on as I negotiated the things I was being told by you, Mom, Dad, and all you Americans. And I learned a lot about a lot of things that many people don't have access to. And then I started being told, you should be grateful. You should be grateful. Why aren't you more grateful? You should be more grateful. Do you know how many people? You should be grateful. So I began to comprehend the rarefied air of my particular circumstance. But all that made me want to do is shut down the joining aspect even more and feed the individual self more to comprehend and think and learn and explore, because I could, because others couldn't, and because I distinctly see the world. So I remember at that time a critical thing happened was I went to see my cousin Ravi, who died. Oh God, he died. Anyway, Ravi. And I was in my early 20s, and I was being told by authority figures and you, Mom and Dad, and a lot of Americans to quit traveling and just come back, go back to school, go get a job. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Like, a handful of people were supportive. And I remember seeing Ravi. I've never told this story on tape anywhere. And I've only told it in person a few times, I think. And one of the times was to Rigo, who made a painting for him that subsequently in New York that I took to him in India before he died, and his wife died, and his child died. Oh, God. And Ravi was instrumental at that age. He took me away off on a trip, and we were together alone, and he sat with me, and we drank whiskey and sat by the ocean, and I laid out what I've been up to and what my plan was, and he was like, don't stop, keep going. Why would you stop now? Like, if you could keep going, go, 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 right? So I did, and I pushed through my 20s. I pushed through my 30s. Watson came along when I was 30 and stayed with me till I was 38. And we had Ocean, and then she left. I'm reminded of when I was younger, so I studied Hinduism with my dad. I was exposed to Christianity, surrounded by it in the United States constantly, and Europe, Western Christianity, and Judaism, and Islam through the lens only of rarefied few people, except when I went back to India. And I became fascinated by the Buddhists and studied Buddhism for 12, 15 years. And in that time, Taoism, the differences between the sort of Japanese variants and the Hindu ones. And I'm reminded of the Zen koan that's, I think, in Gateless Gate, the Mumonkan, about the monk who says, "Is that so?" Young pretty girl, he lives at the edge of town alone. Young pretty girl gets pregnant. The parents confront her. She's crying and says, "It was the monk." The parents come bring the girl to him and say, "You're the father of this child, and what have you done? You've been pregnant with this woman." And he says, "Is that so?" And then they go, she has the baby, and now they take the baby to, "You have to care for this baby because is that so?" And then he raises the baby, and then finally she breaks down and says, "Oh my, I lied. It wasn't him. It was this other somebody traveling." And they come and say sheepishly, "Oh, monk, we're so sorry. We'll have to take the baby now, and we'll go." And he says, "Is that so?" There's a kind of neutrality that I attributed for myself to journalism, or distance, or understanding, intellectual distance for me to understand what people are trying to tell me is right in the world, that they absorb as a kind of neutralization of ego, pure neutralization of ego, right? And I got fascinated by that for a while. I had a long beard and long hair and looked very different, and was able to observe from within that posture a world that was looking at me with different regard or disregard until 9/11, when now the way I looked suddenly equaled terrorist. A child in New York on October 10th, I believe it was, a Wednesday, I remember that, and I was walking to the subway, yelled, let go of his mom's hand, pointed at me, and yelled, "Osama bin Laden, Osama bin Laden," in terror. Because for the last, what had happened in the city and everybody's fucking state, and how a child, a month after the events, pointed at me across the street, and I looked at him, and I kind of just shrugged. I didn't say anything, actually. I looked at him, I shrugged. His mother was embarrassed, but not really. The whole street was tense. There were a lot of performative little moments in that window after 9/11. They are in the 9/11 material. That's true. It's written, but it's never been. I don't like. These are stories that I feel like are kind of like they've got to be captured and transmitted somehow. But I basically don't think I don't trust anyone. I don't believe anybody really listens or believes me anymore, and that's what's gotten really frustrating. So what is the method? What is the method to communicate this material? That's what I'm ruminating on today. 25 minutes I've sat here ruminating on it with you. If you stayed this long, you get a cookie. I don't have any cookies. I don't really like cookies. What do you get? 25 guys, one common goal. Win today. I like this one. ASMR. If you have an alert mind, and instead of actualizing stuff, you spend it thinking you can, in fact, penetrate concepts. I believe this. And the more patient you are with it, the deeper you can get, or the more... I keep using the word deep improperly here. We were going to work today, too. Yay. Oh, yeah, this thing's pretty cool. Starting to get there. That's too many stars. We're going to ditch some of these stars right now. Oh, I love the decision we made about the tankers. You can see the trawler, the container ship, the tankers, and the reflection on the water. Everything about that is spot on. Ring ding 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 ding. All right, too many stars. And we're going to have to put the thing back in order to figure out how to reduce the stars. And this television's not working. My notion of using a single white dot to represent the thing going off. I'm not sure we can do that. %, of the screen is covered by the claws of the dragon, so we have to figure out. I think a smarter move is to drop something in that screen that we know is going to be masked on the top right. It'll give it more meaning than neutralization. The neutralization concept we had yesterday was cool, and it might be usable in another context, but not this one. There's a good example of spending the night, coming back, looking at fresh eyes, and seeing through something. In my opinion, it may seem to you like I'm just making, I don't know, random decisions, but they're not random to me. They're rational. And as I said, everything is is a part of coming to the conclusions. So good decisions like the tankers is awesome. And bad decisions, not necessarily bad, but not perfect decisions like this one, now have to be adapted and evolved. And I've never done it live in front of a camera, so it feels strange to explain it, I guess. But I want to do that. I want to document it so that I can. I'm not writing. It's irritating me. The fact that I'm not writing is really irritating me. It's been like 10 years. And I'm not sure why. I know why. I don't like any of the freaking tools. And no one's reading. Which is why I don't want to do Twitter. I'm just giving it away on Twitter. If I just tweet all day, that's all my stuff just going out into the world for free, for no reason, and it's gone instantly. They figured out a way to kill us. That's what they've done.